I loved Percy Jackson as a kid. It's part of the reason why I studied classics, and definitely something that just got me into reading. They're currently making a show about it, which comes out tomorrow. So I thought I'd reread Percy Jackson. This doesn't have a cover because I lost the cover at some point, and I ended up just rereading all 5 of the books because I have no self-control. I want to talk about A, if they still hold up, and B, I wanted to talk about the importance of good kids' books. Before you ask, no, I'm not going to watch the movies. Yes, they are that bad, and no, you can't convince me otherwise. Okay, so for some context, Percy Jackson is a kid's book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Spoiler alert, whatever. I read Percy Jackson as a kid and really liked it. In my opinion, it was better than all of the other books I read around that same period, like Aragon, Twilight, Harry Potter, How to Train Your Dragon, Warriors, etc. Steep competition, I know. Keep in mind that Percy Jackson was written for like 10 to 12-year-olds. Unlike some of the other books that I mentioned, which were written by 10 to 12-year-olds. So I'm not going to be judging it too harshly. Like, yeah, some of the scenes are a bit fast, or some of the topics aren't too complex. Like, okay, whatever. It was literally written for like 8-year-olds. Relax. It's not hard to read, and I won't be judging it like a Susan Sontag or a Daniel Kahneman book. The first thing I noticed when rereading is just how funny Percy is. He's witty. He's entertaining. His jokes and quips feel natural, but they keep you entertained. I also remember this from when I was a kid. I don't remember any of the jokes or anything being set up or feeling unnatural, but I do remember laughing as I read. Part of what makes this series so enjoyable is just how relatable the characters are. Percy doesn't see himself as some big important guy. He doesn't have a god complex. And that's part of what makes us like him. On the thread of relatability, the books do a good job of exploring real issues, like parents with god complexes. Sorry. No, but for example, Sally Jackson, Percy's mom, a single mom, is wonderful and an amazing character. It represents disabilities, with the biggest examples being Chiron in his wheelchair and Percy with ADHD and dyslexia, along with all of the other characters in the book having ADHD and dyslexia. And finally, it deals with the dynamics of loss quite well, especially for a kid's book. In some ways, it reminds me of Avatar: The Last Airbender in the way that it has mature content like death and sacrifice, but it doesn't force graphic or gory scenes into the story to keep you engaged. It just relies on good storytelling. Some literature uses gore or sex to keep the readers engaged, but it almost feels like a crutch. This book obviously doesn't do that, again because it was written for kids. If you can write a good story with characters that people actually enjoy, you don't need to rely on human gut instinct to keep people engaged. And sure, sometimes those things are essential. They're themes that happen in real life, and thus are important in any form of storytelling. But if they're used as the main selling point, especially in a kid's book, it comes across as just lame and lazy. This reminds me of how long it took Annabeth and Percabeth, to become canon. Percy's on a date with another girl at the beginning of the 5th book, this book, and Annabeth still seems to have mixed feelings about Luke until, like, almost the end of this book. As a kid, I don't feel like I processed that at all. It just didn't hit. It felt obvious from the first book that Percabeth was, like, gonna be a thing. There was honestly no way it wasn't gonna happen, but that wasn't an essential plot point. It was more like a bonus or, like, dessert, like just something to sweeten the deal. That also wasn't the only impactful relationship in the books. There was Annabeth and Grover, which was quite dynamic because they'd known each other for quite a while. There was Percy and Grover, which was impactful because of the empathy link between Percy and Grover. There was Percy and Tyson and Grover, and plenty of others not including Percy, like Annabeth and Luke, Chiron and Grover, Talia and Annabeth, but I'm not going to focus on those because it's called Percy Jackson and the Olympians, not random demigods and the Olympians. Seeing all these characters interact and the growth that comes along with them doing so gives this book depth and texture, which brings me to my main criticism. I think this story could have been told for a higher level audience. The books are fast. We don't linger in fights or dialogue. The beginnings take time to set up the story, and they do so quite well. But it feels like you're walking downhill for the entire book. Like, it's all very easy, which again makes sense because it was literally written for 8-year-olds. The plot is straightforward without that many character complexities or different layering techniques found in, like, more advanced novels of literally any category. It just feels like you're being spoon-fed everything, which, again, I think is fine. It was written for children. But if you want something more compelling, I'd recommend reading like Madeline Miller. I feel like that's a better way to scratch the Greek mythology itch if you're an older reader. This feels like a tough piece of criticism because the book was literally written for children. I just feel like the story is simply so much better than what you expect from a piece of children's literature that it feels a little unfair that it is a children's book. I've heard this sentiment being expressed with a variety of children's media today. The piece of media that comes to mind is Puss in Boots, which actually got quite a bit of praise despite being a children's movie. And it makes me wonder if adult content is simply oversaturated and kids media allows creators to simply tell good stories, but I'm honestly not sure. Additionally, I think this is really important because I feel like a book like Percy Jackson is a wonderful stepping stone, that's a reference if you get it, to more mature pieces of literature and, frankly, other academic interests. I remember after reading Percy Jackson for the first time, it kicked off a lot of other reading in my life, and it also sparked an interest in Greek mythology, which then just spawned an interest in all of classics, which is quite wonderful for my academic career. In fact, I think studying classics was one of the best things I ever did at Stanford, and that wouldn't have happened without Percy Jackson. In conclusion, it does hold up, and I'm excited to see what the show has. Editing me here. The show is good, and I'm watching it currently. But don't read it assuming it'll be good or complex now. Read it for nostalgia, or to better understand the show, or honestly, ideally, to like a younger sibling or cousin. Let me know if there's any series from my childhood that you want me to reread. I'm really enjoying the easy reading that comes along with rereading old books like this.